I hope you're doing super well. Today, we're going to be talking about vocal volume inside of the mix and a super easy trick on how to get the perfect volume every single time for your vocal. Before we dive into the content, I want to let you know that I have a free mixing checklist available to download. It's the first link in the description. It's called the Ultimate Mixing Checklist because it's so great. And also, it'll help you get better, faster mixes guaranteed. Okay, with that said, let's dive straight into the content of how to set your vocal volume inside of your mix. How loud should your vocals actually be? There's a great analogy that I heard way back in the day from the guys over at URM, so the Unstoppable Recording Machine. So A.L. Levy had this analogy of setting your vocal volume and where it should be inside of a mix. And while this does definitely vary from genre to genre, the analogy still holds true. So essentially, you have a vocal and you have your music. Imagine that your music in your mix is just a still body of water. It's relatively constant. Sure, there's some waves, but relatively it's constant. And then your vocal is a canoe inside of that lake. And so you can either be floating just right at sea level, essentially. You're almost drowning inside of the mix. Almost, not hear it because it's diving below the waves. So that is basically the quietest your vocal should ever be. The second option is you could be riding about halfway inside of the mix. So your vocal is sitting on top of it, not really too much. Most of the canoe is still underwater. And then the last place you can place it is above the mix so that the canoe's still touching the water, but it's just barely skimming on the very top of it. To me, that was one of the pivotal moments of me understanding how loud your vocals should be. And obviously this is going to be different in every genre. So pop music, for example, it's just barely skimming the water. It almost sounds like it's too loud for the mix. Metal music, on the other hand, is generally the exact opposite. You have the boats, waterlogged, it's barely skimming above the waves at times. What I'm going to do is actually going to translate that into real numbers of how to measure that inside of your mix. And before we dive into that, I'm going to just play the different options for you. And so you can kind of hear that in the context of an actual mix. All right, so that's a quick demonstration of all those three different settings. Now let's talk about what we actually see on the MAT meter over here. So this is going to be our meter that we're going to use to determine where these vocals actually are and how to actually just set these very quickly inside of your mix. So I'm going to mute the vocal and then let's determine exactly where the mix actually is landing. So it's just kind of kissing the -19 on the average volume here is really what I'm using is the RMS. And so what we're going to do is then add in our vocal. We're going to just slowly bring it up until it adds about 1.5 decibels to the total volume of the mix. And that is going to be your vocals out of the water, okay? So you can see I'm just sitting just barely 1.5 decibels above my mix. And that is essentially 50% of the volume of the mix is now in your vocal. That's the actual mathematical formula that you could use. If I want to move it down so it is halfway into the water, I just subtract 3 decibels. So I'm going to set my vocal at -6. And then this is going to be the same exact kind of formula, except it's taking away 100% of the energy of the vocal, which translates to about 1/4 of the volume of perceived volume of the vocal. And if that doesn't make sense, then don't worry about it. Just subtract 3 decibels, and then that's going to be halfway out of water. And you'll see here, it's about 1 decibel of gain that we're going to be adding from this vocal just from the baseline mix itself.
Come buy me a crown, something old to come buy me a throne.
So you can see that's just touching right at -18. And then if we want our vocal to be underwater, we just subtract another 3 decibels, because again, that's taking away 25% of the perceived volume of the vocal. And so from the top, we have basically half the amount of energy we originally had. Or it's really about 40%, but who cares about math?
Come buy me a crown, something old to come buy me a throne.
So you can tell that's only riding about half a decibel above what the mix was originally without the vocals. So again, this is way too quiet of a vocal for this song, but I would probably think that that's an appropriate level for, say, a metal song. So it's all dependent on the genre you have, but when you're within that range, essentially between half a decibel to 1.5 decibels of gain increase from the mix itself, you're probably in the right ballpark. And so obviously you don't have to stick with just within those 3 positions. However, I think that's a great starting point to determine which one really adds the best character to this song. In this case, I like the middle one just because this isn't really a pop song, but I still want my vocal to be quite prominent. And so I'm probably going to place it between -3 and -6 on this fader over here, adding about 1 to 1.5 decibels of gain to the mix itself. Thanks for watching. And if you found this at all helpful, then please subscribe, because I release videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in order to help you get more professional mixes. I'll see you in the next one.